have to have a bigger share in decision making than they have in the present system, which reflects the power balance in 1945 over 50 years ago. That's when Bretton Woods institutions were set up. So if we want China to use its spectacular reserves for the good of the global economy, then we can't expect the Chinese to be only allowed to use those reserves when we decide where they should be put. It's absolutely crazy. Yes, you can bail out our banks, but you can't buy shares in this or that industry. It's an impossible position for us to assert.
Well, let's talk about another thing going on in the world. The biggest event, political, that of course is the presidential election in the United States. And everybody is expecting change, especially from Europe, with the new administration. But with the current political foreign policy situation, as well as the financial crisis, how much change really, Lord Patten, do you expect a new president from the U.S. to make? From a European perspective, for example.
I expect a great deal of change. I think Senator Obama will win. I think it will be fairly sensational for America to have a black president. It's had 2 black secretaries of state, but to have a black president elected on a large vote will be, I think, an astonishing signal to the rest of the world. And I think all of us have to recognize, China, India, Europe, that America is still the world's only superpower in a military and broader sense. America is the only country that matters everywhere. So that whatever the big problem, unless America is involved in solving it, it won't get tackled. I think we will have a presidency after this election in Washington which understands that just because America is powerful doesn't mean that America can do everything on its own. It can't.
You said America is the superpower. Almost everybody would agree with you in today's world. And yet, what we have seen over the past few years, starting from possibly the war in Afghanistan, even until today with the financial crisis, is the erosion, as some believe, the so-called leadership of the United States, and also the function of some of the international institutions established after World War II with the leadership of the United States. For example, the IMF, which failed its responsibility during the Asian financial crisis, the United Nations, which have not been able to stop some of the crises in the world, and there are many other examples like this. So the Bretton Woods institution that you talk about, which is now seeing its defects of dollar pegging only. So are we seeing a huge change soon as a result of the 2 wars and the financial crisis? And if there is, what kind of change is it likely to happen?
I think we have seen change, and pretty big change, part of it a result of American errors, part of it a result of other people succeeding.
Other people meaning?
Well, first of all, after the Second World War, Europe. More recently, Asia. First of all, East Asia, and then China and India. After all, you could well argue that it's been the last generation in China, the last 25 years, that you've seen this spectacular surge in economic growth and improvement in economic performance. So I think that all those are factors in changing the balance in the world so that it's no longer, to borrow a not very attractive phrase, unipolar, insofar as it's ever been. And I think an American president has to recognize that he can't make everything happen just by issuing directions. He has to work with other people. But he's still an American president, the most powerful politician in the world. And we still need an American president who will work with us in order to tackle global problems. Now, if I was advising Senator Obama, and I don't just say this because I'm speaking on Chinese television, I've said it in my book. If I was advising President Obama after he took office, I would say that at the heart of his foreign policy relations should be building a constructive relationship with China. He's not going to agree with China on everything. China isn't going to agree with him on everything. But I can't think of a big international issue. Nuclear proliferation, dealing with Iran and North Korea, dealing with climate change, dealing with epidemic disease, dealing with the world's financial problems. None of these problems, none of these issues can be dealt with unless there is agreement between America and China.
All right, you have already assigned the task for the new U.S. president and also for China. What about for Europe? As you said, you have also recognized Europe has been living in what you call a Pax Americana. Just briefly, where do you think, with the shift of paradigm, as you mentioned earlier, the perfect situation for a Europe-China relation?
I used to think that China sometimes understood what was happening in Europe better than some Europeans did.
What about now? Do you still believe
which was
so?
paradoxical, and I still think that's the case. Look, I think Europe and China, despite disagreements about some issues, have managed to sort out a huge number of problems in the economic, the commercial, the regulatory field over the last few years. Quite difficult problems which dogged our relationship for a long time. There are still challenges to us in areas like intellectual property and so on, but I think that we've actually shown how to build brick by brick a very strong direct relationship which is in the interests of both parties to it. We won't agree on everything. I hope we can now be part of the resistance in the world to the growth of protectionism. I hope we can both be on the same side in arguing for a more open world economy, and I hope that we can also work with the United States in trying in different parts of the world to deal with the issues which, as I say in my book, no single nation state can deal with on its own.
And finally, Lord Paton, a personal question. Well, you have been a controversial figure in China as a result of serving as the last governor from Britain in Hong Kong, and yet many people here are very interested in you as a politician. So after serving in politics almost all your life, though now you're serving for the University of Oxford in the UK, what do you think you have learned from your experience that can share with all of us?
I think I've learned the importance of ideas in politics. I think I've learned the importance of being consistent and clear. I think that even when Chinese officials disagreed with me, they knew that I was trying to do what I said I would do, and that I didn't say one thing and then do another. I think that as a commissioner I had a particularly good relationship with my Chinese opposite numbers, and we worked very successfully together without always agreeing, but usually finding ways through problems. But above all, what I think I've learned is the point I made at the beginning, that politics and sustainable solutions need a proper principled and intellectual basis to them. And I remain passionately interested in political ideas, in political philosophy, and in the extent to which political ideas and philosophy apply to every country's politics.
Well, Lord Chris Paton, thank you so much for coming over to Dialogue, and congratulations to your current post with the University of Oxford.
Thank you.
And your new book, What Next?
Thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm looking forward to continuing to work with the 750 students from China that we now have at Oxford.